Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to somehow end the conference while getting the overview, what is the outcome of our think tank sessions we had yesterday. So we had originally 6 think tank sessions, but we blurred think tank session together. And I think this is very interesting that I now ask the host of the think tank session to join me here and to give us an overview what you have done. Let me first start with Steve. Haven't seen you in a long while, so therefore, be so kind and tell us a bit more about your think tank, plus what is the outcome out of your session.
Okay, we did access to justice. So we were the lawyers, and we've done this for a couple of years now, and we wanted to figure out we wanted to identify problems and throw them the challenge to the tech people about what you can do to solve the problems. So we didn't come up with solutions as much as try to identify problems. And we wanted to also figure out the blockchain and AI is being used the most right now, even for access to justice issues in very developed places. So the US, Canada, Australia, these are the places where we see some programs up and running using AI, for example, to give early assessments to people about their legal rights and obligations and direct them to legal resources. So we tried to start by thinking about access to justice in places that there aren't resources, and we talked a bit about small states and particularly island states and some of the challenges they face, which include lack of a homegrown judiciary, no judges, lack of lawyers, also not necessarily a reliance on sort of codified law, but customary law being an important part in decision making, but facing also just physical issues like remoteness from where decisions are made, distance, lack of infrastructure, lack of access to technology. And so we were moving in that direction and trying to think about problems, but we still came back to the idea, I think, of chatbots and chatbots being really important for access to justice. And I'm going to go to blockchain in a second, but chatbots, one of them that we started to think about the problems with chatbots being what information comes into the large language model that's being used, and this issue of whether there's an incentive to digitalize the law in jurisdictions that are not necessarily as developed, and how we do that. And so let me park that for a second. The other issue we start talking about is thinking about access to justice in other terms than places, but for types of people who have difficulty. And we were talking about a program in Paris that is designed to think about people who may be disabled or otherwise have difficulty dealing with the interface with the legal system, and a program that Amal is involved in that deals with people, trying to help people to interact with the sort of forms and the systems and understand how to communicate. And so we started to think about both this in terms of location, remote jurisdictions, poor jurisdictions, and the difficulties people have sometimes dealing with what we all might think is easily accessible. And so those are the first 2 sets of challenges we identified that we think need to be addressed, which is thinking about the right audiences, where the need is, and then also this issue around incentivizing the people who create the systems, the AI systems, to identify and digitalize the law that's needed. And what we started talking about was, if you create tools, for example, that help judges use AI to summarize, but also moving in the direction of also use AI to help draft their decisions, why not go a step further and use those same tools to summarize or to publish the decisions? So you're already in AI, you're already in a system where you're not having decisions by judges or arbitrators being essentially a piece of paper, but you're having something that's not just digitalized, but digitalized into a system where it then can be summarized, including in a lot of the systems that we work in, there are publishers who will put summaries and keynotes and head notes to explain the significance of different parts of the decision. If you're using AI to generate the decision, you might then be able to use AI to publish the decision and put it into a database. So that's kind of where we were going to try to identify ways to get at this. And then we switched topic to something that I think will overlap with the cybersecurity people. And we were talking about, from a litigator's perspective, the dangers that are already here with faking evidence and the reliability of evidence in an age with the ability to use AI to create false evidence. So we were talking about hallucinations, but we were moving beyond that to deliberately faked evidence. And one of the uses of blockchain that is being talked about a lot already in legal systems is to use tokens once evidence comes into the legal system to show that the evidence is not being altered. I mean, digression also for property transactions and other things, to create that unalterable record of the transaction, but to use that to show that evidence is not being altered. And so our question was, and we asked it last night and we got a bad answer, but our question was, to avoid fake evidence, what do we need to do, and are tokens a way to create authenticity around communications in real time? So before you've put it in as evidence into a case where you can put a token into it and you can show that it's not been altered once it comes into a legal proceeding, do we need to move to a world where we are putting tokens into our communications immediately? So if I send an email, Microsoft Outlook puts a token into it that goes to a blockchain register, so then in 5 years, when Marlene sues me, and I say that's a fake version of that email, she can go to the blockchain and show that that is the original version of the email that has not been altered. And our question was, so what are the costs? We also recognize all the privacy and other issues with that, but what are the costs? How expensive would it be? And how do we solve this problem of being able to fake everything? Because we care about evidence. And once the evidence is in this a proceeding, we're not so concerned about that. It's the evidence before it comes into the proceeding and its reliability. So I think that's where I'll stop. But those are the problems we came up with is how do we, when we're using AI, how do we incentivize and create the digitalization of the law that can then be used in large language models? That means that we're opening this up beyond German law and US law and Australian law into other legal systems, with the additional challenge of figuring out what do we do with systems that rely on customary rules and not necessarily codified law. And the other one is how do we deal with this issue of evidence, and that leads to this huge societal problem of how do we combat fakes. And is the answer that we put tokens in stuff immediately, so we're basically embossing, or watermarking everything that we communicate. And we recognize all the problems that it raises, but that's the challenge we wanted to give to the room.
Thank you so much for the challenge. I would like to say challenge accepted. Thank you. And as all hosts and speakers, I would like to say thank you, Steve, for being with us. Gabor, would you please be so kind and join me? Because you mentioned cybersecurity is important. We need to take it more into consideration. And Gabor, I think you could probably tell more about our working group, our think tank session, what we have done, what was the debate about, and what is the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So I can join you in this, what you have been saying now, because we certainly have got to a point where we have identified similar thoughts about this challenge. It was a combined think tank session of from Ledger to Shield about cybersecurity and the use of blockchain in cybersecurity, and the other one was AI. I don't know the exact title, but we have been thinking about it, and we have started from two different approaches. We have started from the technical approach on one hand, and we have started from the more philosophical or societal approach on the other hand. It was not an easy discussion, to be honest, and as the deeper we got into it, we had, I think all of us had the feeling that probably the outcome of this think tank wouldn't be an exact solution, rather the need to talk more about these topics and be in the process rather than expecting ourselves to, generate an actual outcome of this whole session. But then we ended up with a use case where we were trying to identify similarly to what you have explained about the tokenization of the actual data, what is information, what is data, how people interpret raw data through biases, through narratives, and then how it becomes information at the end of the day. Yeah, it's something we have to talk about more, definitely. That's one outcome of our think tank session, because it's not so straightforward that we put an email into a blockchain and it became evidence for a court. In terms of misinformation, what we saw in the current geopolitical situation a lot, probably the technology already exists in most of the cases to be able to, put a stamp or a verification mark or whatever that it's a trusted source. The CCD chip in our camera RC must have seen the actual pixels, which is delivered through the different layers of media. But even though the technology exists, if the humans will not implement the processes and will not change their behavior in order to, reach the greater good, or I don't know how to post it, but in order to achieve something which is supposed to be beneficial for us as humanity or society, then we can spin around on our heads with our technology ready and waiting for being used. It's useless. So I think the main takeaway was to get a little bit different angle from the from my side at least, that I'm too technical in this sense, and I always want to use the hammer for everything. But it is beneficial to take a look at how humans are behaving and what technologies could be implemented in those processes, the way we behave, in order to achieve anything, because technology is there, we tend not to use it based on biases, narratives, whatever, right? So there is no single outcome of this think tank, which is, I think, could be a good expected outcome. But to sum it up, this was what we have talked about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So again, sorry, wait. Also for you, as the host, thank you so much. Also here we see question of question of question. It's not ending. What we probably can say, because I was in that think tank session too, that technology-wise, a lot of things are doable. Very easy. It's there, as Gabor mentioned. It's there. But the thing is how to scale it up, to make it that people are going to adapt things, that they are not like talking always about blockchain without getting the understanding and so on. So there's far more. We now need to create the stories, the narratives, the use cases, that we are not using the hammer for all and everything. Technology-wise, solutions are there. Now the next step should be taken into consideration. Next step taken into consideration, according to finance. I would like to, finance and tax. Okay, so Matthias, please be so kind, join me and give me the overview of your results in your group, please.
Also, I'm so shy. Okay, as already told, we have some problems with taxes. We also discussed in this group, that's why I don't repeat it what you already have in mind. We have two topics that are similar, but not the same side of the medal. Because all what has to do with liquidity, with payment and everything like that, and it combines with banks, it's in a kind of way terrible. Because there are so much high regulations, and as I told you, in tax law we don't have it. So it's not the same side of the medal, but it has many things together. So you need banks to cash out. You need banks, and I already talked with Thomas about there are so many layers to think about. The one layer is about maybe hijacked because you are rich. If you would put your tokens into a bank, they will not tell who it is because they are used to it. Especially in Liechtenstein, they will never tell. Besides the German fiscal authorities asking, but not to the other ones. And that's our topics. And so it's, of course, it's necessary about safety and it's about trust. And so we talked first about use cases, and that has nothing in common with taxes. We talked about sugar from Brasilia. Yes, it's sold in the Europe. And we talk about proof of source, that it's really sugar coming from Brasilia. It's sold by the farmer there, and the whole process is tracked by the blockchain with all participants, so each ship, each custom service, each driver from a heavy truck and something like that could be proof that this ton of sugar is coming to Switzerland maybe. And so it's a proof of source, and of course, the money can go back. So by autonomous processes, the payment can be solved by robots or bots that use on every step the payment. So you can say like a waterfall, it's coming with much money on the first step and a little money for the farmer at the end. It will ever be the same story. It will be not the most what's at the end. But so you can understand how finance and taxes could work. So in this best option, there's no human necessary to tax it and to pay it. And if you think about Waymo, that's my usually example, if you go in a taxi and it's driven by electricity, would you think that someone is go to Tesla and say, I put my bank card in? So the van who's going behind the taxi and say, I will pay the invoice for the energy? No. It has to be by smart contract. And that's the same topic. So we have to plot use cases, what people understand, so that they are able to understand how to tax it and how to make it finance. Of course, blockchain makes everything in transactions more efficient. Because, to explain, I'm also a member of the EDST, that's a board in Germany where all big companies are in. We talk about make standards and make it efficient in taxation. And if you understand that if you send a piece, whatever, a good from Germany to France, so it sounds easy. But of course you need minimum 5 papers, written papers, to prove that's really going from Germany to France. That's impossible. And that's why that's expensive. Because when you think about a tax assessment, only the tax assessment, only the paper printed in Germany, it's 25 euro each. Just for the tax assessment paper. Just from the moment it is printed until it's delivered to yourself. So you can imagine how inefficient our tax system is in the world now. And blockchain saves the truth. So I don't have the problem to explain to any customs, to any bank officer or whatever is necessary what happened, because he can prove by itself, because the blockchain can tell him the story from the end and forever at the end, as one colleague yesterday told. It's never possible to forget it. And so you know it really happened. But we need standards, and Liechtenstein is one possibility in the world. They have fixed standards before the government really recognizes what it is. And so it needs courage to say, we like to go further and we like to set standards. And so we need the scientists, we need the lawyers, we need the tax advisors, and we need the economy to set standards in taxes and in token economics. And we need tax frameworks that works. We don't need tax frameworks that say, okay, we like to have it, but it does not fit. And usually it does not fit. And that's the most problem, that you have to go to lawyer, to have to go to court. And after many, many years, I filed for, you have to imagine that in Germany we had a court in Cologne, and they told cryptocurrencies are comparable with foreign currencies. And then you would think, okay, then we would tax it as foreign currencies. That would be easier. But they deny. And so we have to go to court again and to say, how about to tax it as a foreign currency? It would be many things easier, And 6 weeks ago, in Nuremberg, the court said, it's not like for Asian currencies. And so they open a full range of, I think it's about 18 possibilities to bring your tax refund in Germany for a private investor to the fiscal authorities. So if we don't have standards and we have no law working, the judges say, Alice, that's a good idea, do what you want. But how to be taxed as you do as you want? No government likes this, and the people usually also not. Also, we need the AMLA. I'm not a fan of them, but I know that we need them. So we need standards also in KYC processes, because if we don't have, you are not able to be compliant, as I already told you. And we need politicians who like to support, adopt, and enforce this. Because if we don't have politicians with courage, it will never happen. That were our main results. And what we enjoyed mostly was to talk with the students. That was a really amazing fact. And we had really enlightening moments, because for a student, I know it from my both sons, they like to know why they study. They need the aim after the study, because the study is only the first step, and now, after that, you all know it. It's not the end if you get the diploma, it's just the beginning. That was my power group.
Thank you so much, Matthias. It was very interesting to also hear what you have worked on. And then we have one last think tank session. It was a bit a different kind of think tank session because it was a closed one, and therefore we are more than interested to understand what you've talked about. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you very much. Yes, now it's on, right? Yeah, it was one of our Digital Asset Roundtable Experts Series sessions, DARTI, how we like to call them. It was the 18th, actually, that we held with the support of the European Commission, and therefore Joachim Schwerin, yes, almost a dot, had been with us. And for the first time, this was a new one, he brought his own topic. Typically, he gives the keynote or the welcome notes or something. But yesterday, he brought his own topic, which was, how can we establish compliant DAOs to work? Right? Because they did a study last year looking specifically into co-ops and associations and, you know, the options out there, but nothing really fits. So this is a topic that he will further pursue. And it was very interesting to get some input from, you know, different jurisdictions around the table on that. The more emotional topic was the question, when is coding of software beginning to be a criminal offense? And that was the Tornado Cash case. Not sure, maybe you raise your hand who did not hear from Tornado Cash before? Anyone? Okay, so Tornado Cash was one of these things that I had, prior to yesterday, called a mixer, but I learned it's not a mixer. It is a privacy enhancing tool which you can use to prevent others from tracing you back when you do transactions, blockchain-based transactions. So if you transfer your Bitcoin and you don't want that everybody sees that you're a millionaire and transferred just, you know, according amount of Bitcoin, then you could put through it the Tornado Cash smart contract, right? Because then it's not back traceable. Basically how they do it, they pool it, right? So different people feed into one pool, and then you don't really see when it gets out where it came from, right? So you can imagine that for anti-money laundering officers, this tool is really a pain, right? And so what they did in the Netherlands is they actually raised a criminal case against the developer of that tool. And he was charged with, I think, 4.5-year prison. Imagine? And we had the criminal defense lawyer of that Tornado Cash developer yesterday with us, who gave us a deep analysis about how the court construed the law. And it was really interesting to learn that the Dutch court actually said that the subject doing the criminal offense was the smart contract, right? And then they said because they did not do sufficient, they did not build in sufficient means to prevent it from being misused. That was their own criminal offense. And I mean, it was just first instance, and they are now building the case for the second instance. And we just supported with brainstorming yesterday what arguments they could bring. And one thing I was just suggesting is because there had been a famous Dutch bank which actually, was proven to undertake money laundering, right? And their directors, they did not go into prison, right? They paid a fine, and that was it. So I said, from a German background, this would be very unconstitutional to send somebody into court for developing a dual-use tool, right? I mean, a privacy-enhancing tool can be used for good things and for bad things, right? It's not a bad-only tool. And on the other hand, leaving the directors of large banks without any criminal charges, that would be against, the equality principles under at least our constitution. I believe the European rules should have a similar thing to it. Yeah, so that was quite emotional discussion. And then we came back to a very dry topic, which is the just finished consultation of the European Data Protection Board with regard to the use of blockchain and GDPR. And that was really devastating because they basically say you are not permitted to run a blockchain where you cannot delete. Exactly. So, yeah. So we were trying to think about how we could propose to differently construe the GDPR, because the fact is the blockchains are running, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense as a regulator to simply sit down at your table and say, no, 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 when the reality out there is simply different, right? And, oh yeah, coming back, just one hint. There was this discussion how to, if there are tech solutions for having permanent evidence about some facts going on. Take a look at the Kavaena app from ETO group, right? They built something like this for pictures. So when you take your picture through the Kavaena app, it will get a timestamp on the blockchain. I think they use IOTA. And you can also give tips to other photographers if you like their stuff. So that's already, a first thing that is up and running, and it is built from a German company, right? So, yeah, we had them last year here, right? You remember? I do. Okay, that were the 3 topics that we discussed yesterday.
Thank you so much, Nina. So.